Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to share with you some books that I would recommend you read if you're looking for something to read. Now, May is the month of the Asian Readathon, which is one of my favorite readathons. I try to participate every year. And then it is also Asian American Heritage Month in the US. Now, I'm from Germany, so we don't really have that here, but I still thought it would be a good time to recommend to you some of my favorite books by Asian authors that I have read in the last year. Now, last year during this month I did a video talking about my favorite books by Asian authors, so if you want to see that video I will link it at the end. So that's why this year I'm just gonna go over the new favorites that I have read in the last 12 months, so I don't repeat myself too much, but there were quite a few that I would highly recommend. So let's get into these books. So I tried to order them by genre, and the one we're starting out with is science fiction and fantasy, while I have to say I'm a fantasy reader, so don't expect too much sci-fi. So these are in no particular order. We're just gonna start out with the fantasy. And the first one I wanted to mention is Our Violent Ends by Gong. This is the second book in a duology, the first one being These Violent Delights. And this is a story inspired by Romeo and Juliet, set in the 1920s in Shanghai. And we have a mysterious illness that leads people to kill themselves, and our main characters Roma and Juliet are trying to figure out what is going on and to save their city. I had a lot of fun with this duology, and I think that the second book definitely brought it to a satisfying ending. And if you like these kind of Romeo and Juliet inspired rivals to lovers stories, then this might be worth checking out. The next one is The Bone-Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. This is the whole trilogy that is completed, so you can read the complete series right now if you want to. The Bone-Shard Daughter was quite hyped, but then I feel like the hype has died down by now a little bit, so I feel okay mentioning it again. I have a complete reading vlog for the series, so if you want to hear my deep dive, then definitely check that video out. In The Bone-Shard Daughter, we have two kind of main perspectives that we follow. We have a young woman who is the daughter of the emperor, and she has some kind of memory loss. She doesn't really remember what she's supposed to remember, and so her father is very hard on her. And she's supposed to learn this bone shard magic that basically keeps their empire afloat. And with that magic, they can bring things to life that kind of take the life force out of a bone. And so every citizen in this empire has to have this bone removed during a age, I don't know, when they're 14 or something. And then the palace keeps all of these bones, and when they need to make these constructs they will use these bones, and that has the side effect that the life force leaves the people the bones are taken from. So there is kind of a sickness involved with that as well. The other perspective we have is Jovis, who is a smuggler, but because of things that happen and a little companion he meets, he becomes a very reluctant hero who starts saving children from this bone ceremony thing. Now, this is quite an interesting fantasy world with an interesting magic system. I still wasn't the biggest fan. I think there are better series out there. It was a tiny little bit overhyped for me, but I would still recommend it. If you read a lot of fantasy, I don't think you can go wrong with trying this one. The next book is also the finale in a duology, but this is more companion books, and that is Realm of Ash by Tasha Suri. This one follows Empire of Sand, and in the second book we are following the younger sister of the main character of the first book, so they are not continuations, but more like companions. And I really enjoyed this book. We are following this young girl who grows up kind of in like the court system, and she meets someone who is very fascinating to her, but it's kind of like a forbidden love story. They are not really supposed to be attracted to each other, but they do have a common goal. And this world is quite interesting because we are looking at this empire where there is a certain people that is marginalized and driven away, and the first book focuses a lot on that, but then the second book had more of the religious aspects in it, which I also just really enjoyed. So I think if I put the two against each other, I actually like the second book a little bit more than the first book, but I think with that I'm in the minority. But either way, I would recommend this YA duology if you're interested. Then we have a novella series that I am quite obsessed with. I definitely need to read the next books, but I already talked about the first book in the first video, I think, and now we're going to talk about the second book, and that is When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain by Nghi. This is a novella series that follows a monk who goes around collecting stories, so we always have this kind of story that is told to them, and then also we do have their journey that we can also see throughout these novellas. And this one I really enjoyed. It was very different from the first one, but I think that I liked it the same, but just for different reasons. I think that, yeah, it just had this like fairy tale feeling to it because we get told this story, but then it also had a little bit more of intrigue to it with the like actual storyline of the monk as well. So yeah, this one was really great. I really loved this. Now if we're going more into the sci-fi direction, I would recommend This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Mohtar and Max Gladstone. And on this one we do have, it's like very famous, so I think you've heard of it probably, but we have two women who are on opposite sides of the war. They're both spies, and they are fighting a time war. So they are basically time traveling and always trying to go back in time and to tweak things so that they will turn out good for their own side. And so they meet again and again throughout time, and they start writing letters to each other, and through that start falling in love in a way. And I really enjoyed this one. I read it last year. I did a whole vlog about it. So again, if you want to hear more of my thoughts, then I would recommend that vlog. And then last but not least for this category, I have a dystopian novel that I literally just finished, and that is Our Missing Hearts by Celeste Ng. This is a dystopia that is very much inspired by the things that were going on in the US during the pandemic. So the pandemic itself doesn't really happen in this world, but a lot of the like sentiments and the conflicts that we saw during that time definitely inspired this dystopia, where we're looking at a new Cold War between the US and China. And so people of Asian descent in the US have a very hard time, and there is this new law called PACT that allows the government to take children away from their unpatriotic families, and it explores that. It is a very sad book, but a very moving book, and I would highly recommend. Next we're going into the category of romance and literary fiction. Now I don't really read romance, so I only have one book really for that, and that is 3 Holidays and a Wedding by Uzma Jalaluddin and Marissa Stapley. Now this is more of a like holiday, like Christmassy book, but what I really liked about this one is that it combines 3 holidays, as the title would suggest. So we have Ramadan, we have Christmas, and we have Hanukkah. And so this book plays on this idea that there are certain years, they're not that often, but there are certain years where all of these holidays happen at the same time. And we are following 2 young women. One is going to Canada to meet the parents of her new boyfriend, who is very rich and has very set expectations on what a girlfriend should be like, and the other girl is going with her family because her sister is supposed to get married in Canada, and they are all on the same flight, and this flight has to do like an emergency landing because of the bad weather, and they are stuck in this like very small town in Canada. But there's also a Christmas movie that is currently filmed in this town, so we also have the like film crew, which is one of my favorite tropes in these like romancy novels. So I had so much fun with it, and if you're looking for a holiday read, definitely recommend this one. Now moving on to the literary fiction and back to Celeste Ng, because I also read Little Fires Everywhere last year and I really enjoyed it. I gave all of Celeste Ng's books 5 stars. She's one of my favorite authors and I just highly recommend her books so much. This one also has a TV show, so if you don't feel like reading, you can still watch it. But what we basically look at in this book is 2 families, and the one family is like a wealthy, like higher middle class family, and then we have a lone mother with her daughter, and they move into a house that belongs to this first family, and then we watch their lives kind of intertwine and what's happening there. And it's just, I don't know, like Celeste Ng has such a talent at looking at people and at relationships and really getting into it, and I just love it. It's not that these stories are like thrillers, like a lot of going on, but they're just so compelling and intriguing, and I love reading about interesting characters, so this book was the one for me. Then a bit of an odd one is Chlorine by Jade. Now this I would describe as kind of a hot girl book, because like, you know, last year that was kind of like the TikTok slogan or whatever, and when you looked at lists of books that were like in this category, they were usually like very weird literary fiction books, and this is definitely one of those. It has horror elements, but it is definitely mostly literary fiction, and we're following a young girl called Nghi, and she is a mermaid, but so far only inside and not on the outside. She is a swimmer, she is in the high school swim team, I think, and this book explores her journey to become a mermaid in a very weird sense. Now this book is definitely not for everyone. There is quite some interesting scenes in there. Like there is a whole thing, like multiple scenes about her first period that I think a lot of people would feel kind of uncomfortable about reading, not only because it is period and we were taught to feel uncomfortable about it, but the way that the characters go about it is interesting to say the least. But yeah, this is definitely an experience, and if you're looking for one of those books, then I would recommend Chlorine. The next we have Sea Change by Gina Chung, and this is a book that I have seen criticized quite a bit, but I think it is because people expected something that the book doesn't do. This is basically something I would call a late coming of age novel, so we are looking at a woman who's already, I don't know, like in her late 20s or 30s or something like that, so more of my age range, and she had this fiancé and she thought that her life was kind of mapped out, and then he leaves her to go and train to go to Mars. So this is set slightly in the future, but you don't really feel a lot of that. And then we also have this thing that there is a stretch of sea, of ocean, that has been polluted so much that the wildlife there has changed drastically, and they're growing much larger than they were in like clean waters. And her father was someone who explored that as a biologist, I think, and he went missing. And so she also has this like weird connection to an octopus who was brought back from this like area of ocean to the aquarium where she lives by her father on one of his expeditions. And yeah, this is just about this character finding out who she is, what she wants in life, just finding her way. And I think as someone who is now in her 30s and still trying to figure life out, because it's not that easy, I really like these kind of novels because they show that, you know, your teenage years are not the only growing up, coming of age area in your life, and you can grow up even more later as well. And then last but not least, for the literary fiction part, we have Yellowface by R F Kuang. Now, R F Kuang and I do have a bit of a complicated relationship because I'm not the biggest fan of her fantasy. I have read all of her books that are fiction, so I have read the Poppy Wars series. It was okay. And I have read Babel as well, which wasn't really for me. However, Yellowface was right up my alley. In this one, we are looking at a white female author who isn't very successful, but when she was studying, she had this like tentative friend. Like, we do learn quite a bit about their relationship through the book. And this friend is of Asian descent, and she got really popular. Like, her books blew up, she's very famous, and now she's getting a Netflix adaptation. And so they go out to celebrate that, but then there is an accident and this famous author dies, and our main character is the only one who knows about the manuscript for her next book. And so she takes it and makes it her own, and then publishes it. And the thing is that she doesn't really pretend to be Asian to publish the book, but then she also does some things that at least make people believe on first glance that she might be Asian. So for example, she changes her name. She doesn't use her last name but her middle name, which makes it sound like an Asian name because I think it is Song or something like that. And then she also chooses an author picture that in the book is described as like ethnically ambiguous. So from the first glance you can't really tell if this is an Asian woman or not. And we just see how she works on that manuscript, what her improvements on it are, and then also how that all goes down in history. And this is a big fat commentary on the booktube space, the bookish internet space in general, the way that authors and readers and reviewers all like intertwine in messy knots, and I had a lot of fun with that. I really like this book. And the last two recommendations are non-fiction books. The first one is a German non-fiction book that I really enjoyed. It is called Radikale Zärtlichkeit by Seyda, and this is a book about partnership, about love, about how we interact with romantic partners, and I just really enjoyed it. It was really well done, really informative, had great ideas, and if you can read German, I would definitely recommend. I don't know if it has been translated into any languages, but it was a great read. And then last but not least, we have Disability Visibility by Alice Wong, edited by Alice Wong. This is an essay collection that many authors have contributed to, but all of these authors are disabled, and so they're talking about their life experiences in very different areas, very different ways. It's a fantastic essay collection. I would highly recommend if you want to learn more about disability and what it means and how it works in our world today. And I also know that Alice Wong will have a new book out, I think also maybe an essay collection, not quite sure about that, but I will definitely buy that one as well because I really loved Disability Visibility. So I hope that if you have similar reading taste to mine, that you found something you're interested in this little list of books. I would highly encourage you to check all of them out because I loved all of them. And let me know what is one of your favorite books by an Asian author. I would love to hear about that. I will talk to you very soon. Bye!